I work among everyday heroes because I've seen just people stepping up, regardless of title or role, to do whatever it was that our students and families needed.
Hey, everybody, and thanks for tuning in to this edition of Future Ready's Leading Through Unprecedented Times. I am ecstatic for this episode today to have my good friend, Susan Enfield, today, Superintendent of Highline Public Schools in Washington. Susan, it is amazing to have you join us for this conversation. Can you take a moment and introduce yourself to the audience?
Hi, Tom. Good to see you as well. Thanks for the opportunity. So I am Susan Enfield. I'm the proud superintendent for Highline Public Schools in Burien, Washington. So our district actually surrounds SeaTac Airport. So when you can fly again, you will be landing in Highline Public Schools when you visit beautiful Seattle. We are a richly diverse school system serving roughly 18,000 students pre-K through 12. Our students speak over 100 different languages. We pride ourselves on our diversity. And we describe our students as brilliant, beautiful, and brimming with promise. And rather than a mission or vision, we've made a promise in Highline that I would argue is more essential today than it has been ever before. And that is that we commit to, rather we promise, to know every student by name, strength, and need, so they graduate prepared for the future they choose. And I am just completing my 8th year as superintendent.
Yeah, and I absolutely love that. And I stand in awe of your leadership and the work of your team. And I know that what you were just sharing radiates in everything that we see on social media, and it radiates having been in your community, throughout your community there as well. So let me ask you this, as we wrapped up this past school year, where can we even start with this past school year, right? There's been so many unknowns that we had to work through. Our teachers were asked to do things and shift things really overnight. Our principals, you as a superintendent, completely shifted gears. Talk to us about some lessons learned. What are some things that were really on your radar towards that end of the year, some lessons just in reflection, if you would?
Well, I'll be honest with you, I still have to remind myself sometimes that there was a school year prior to March 13th, because it really feels like that's been the year, given our area of emphasis. Gosh, there have been so many lessons learned, Tom, I think over the course of the entire school year, but more specifically since school buildings closed in March. I think the first thing is that, I've always said that those of us who choose to devote our lives to public education get up every day believing that the impossible is possible. And I think we saw a demonstration of that across this country in some magnificent ways, as teachers and nutrition services staff and paraeducators and bus drivers and superintendents and CAOs and principals, all really under very challenging circumstances and with not a lot of time, transitioned to support students in a distance learning environment. I think that's really remarkable, and I think that bears acknowledging, even though I know it's been acknowledged a lot before. But it really speaks to, I think, the fundamental nature of the people that I'm blessed to work with every single day. I tell people that I work among everyday heroes because I've seen just people stepping up, regardless of title or role, to do whatever it was that our students and families needed. And so I think that the biggest lesson is that public school educators, and I include all of us who work in public education in that, are remarkable human beings, really committed to service. And they're pretty darn sharp too, and can pivot on a dime when needed. I think that the other thing, though, on a maybe less happy note, Tom, is that this daylighted, and I've said this many times, you've heard me say it many times over the last several weeks, this daylighted the inequities, not just within our public school system, but within our larger society. I've said for a very long time, in fact, it was in my dissertation many years ago, that we really lay a pretty big expectation at the doorstep of our school systems, asking them to achieve equity, when everything around us perpetuates inequities, housing inequality, income, food insecurity, all of that. Yet when our children come into our public schools, we do everything we can to ameliorate those challenges and provide them with the highest education possible, because that's what we believe in. So on the one hand, I think it's really shown how remarkable our public education folks is, and the extraordinary challenges that we face in delivering on what we want to do for children.
Yeah, so well said. And you have been a complete equity advocate since the day that I met you. And, just seeing what you're sharing out, seeing the resources, seeing whether it's feeding students, providing them with devices, whatever the case means. For you, it's doing whatever you need to do to make sure that every child has that opportunity. At Future Ready Schools, when we talk about equity and access, equity and opportunity. Talk to, if you would, let's dive into that for just a moment further. Your colleagues around the country, for somebody like you, you've been talking about these issues for a long, long time. For others, some saying like, wow, we didn't realize this or we didn't realize that. Our take is COVID-19 didn't create equity issues.
No.
They just exposed them and amplified them. And so talk to your colleagues around the country, superintendents and principals leading schools, as to how to always lead with an equity lens and recognize this isn't a one-time thing or a quick fix. This is a forever moving forward, non-negotiable.
Well said. I agree with that completely. I guess I would return, Tom, to our promise of knowing every student by name, strength, and need so they graduate prepared for the future they choose. I mean, they're pretty words. They sound good, but think about that. If and this would be my challenge to myself, it is every day, and to my fellow superintendents, if we could say that every student in our system was known, truly known, by who they were, by what they were really good and loved, and what they loved doing, and where they needed support, be that academic, emotional, social, whatever that be. If we really knew every student to that level and equipped them with an educational experience that put them on the path beyond high school that they chose, not that an adult imposed upon them based on their own perceptions or belief systems, we would have equitable school systems in many ways. Right? I mean, fundamentally, that is what we are trying to achieve. And I believe that is true regardless of the demographics of your school system, because, there are students in need everywhere in every school system across this country. Some of us have larger concentrations of need than others, but the need is everywhere. And so I think that my challenge would be that I think we perceive that equity only applies to certain districts or certain populations I would say it applies to every district in this country, because that's what we have to deliver on. I will say though, I have had some learning over the last several days and months. And yes, I am a vocal proponent for equity. And I believe that our Highline Promise is in its own way a very, very deep and bold commitment to equity. And we talk about equity a lot and we focus on equity a lot in this district. And what I have realized, given what I see happening across our country now, and the pain and the anger around the state of race relations in our country, and specifically what our African American friends and colleagues and children in this country are experiencing, has made me realize that in some ways, perhaps my focus on equity has given me a pass to really focus on issues of race. And I've addressed that, or I'm beginning to address that with my community, because I do believe that equity encompasses quite a bit, but it is time to lead with a conversation around race and how race is playing out in our school systems and in our other systems across this country. And so I'm in a moment of, I think, self-reflection and learning and realization around the fact that how we talk about equity and how we lead with race in that conversation is more important than ever before.
Yeah, so well said. And thank you for your vulnerability with that. And, just looking at truly, it's talking about systems change and systemic issues for hundreds of years. And how do we upend that for those students, those families, those community members, those staff members, and on ed? And very well said. So let me ask you this. Let's turn our attention a bit to this coming school year. Still lots of unknowns. Obviously, as we're filming this today, there's lots of uncertainty. States are all over the board in terms of what they're recommending or anything that they've put out as we film this today. As the superintendent of a large district, what are some of the things that are on your radar for next year that you're kind of wrestling with? Not that you have answers to, but just some of those big pieces that you're really thinking about for this coming year.
So first and foremost, I'm thinking about how do we ensure that our teachers and staff are connected to our students. I think that connection piece is first and foremost. I said when we first made the transition to distance learning, when our school buildings closed, that that connection piece was most important. And Tom, you know, we've talked a lot about the digital connection, that our students have internet connectivity, but that's not the only connection I'm talking about. It's that internet connection that in this distance learning environment is allowing our students, our children, to remain connected to their school community, which I would argue is more important than ever. There is so much uncertainty, so much fear happening right now, so that for our Highline students to know that even though they're not in school with their classmates and teachers and principals and staff, their school community is still intact, I think is critically important. So making sure that in whatever way we come back next year, we maintain that priority of connecting with our students. And I would also say our families. I think I didn't include this in under lessons learned, but I think that our teachers and principals have come to really realize how much they need the partnership of families in educating our students. And at the same token, I think our families have realized how much they really need their teachers and principals and staff to help their students succeed in school. So we're trying to figure out how do we not lose that? You know, how do we really codify that and make that a part of what school is moving forward? So it's not just a math night or parent-teacher conferences. It's this ongoing relationship and partnership that our families have with their children's school and staff. And then obviously we want to make sure that our students accelerate in their learning. You know, there's been a lot of talk about we don't want to hold students back. We don't want to remediate. We will have to acknowledge that some students are going to need more support to catch up, and we will provide that. But again, we are so deliberate in Highline to approach our children from an asset and not a deficit perspective. And we're sure as hell not going to go back now, right?
Yeah, how
So
about it?
we want to keep that going. So making sure that we keep that focus on learning as best we can. And then also really just continuing to support one another. Teachers supporting students, teachers and districts supporting families, families supporting their children, all of us in it together. I think that one of the things that I've said numerous times throughout the last few months is I'd prefer not to ever have to go through a global pandemic. But if I do, Highline Public Schools and this community is where I want to do it, because the sense of community and the way in which people have stepped up to help one another really has been inspiring and humbling to me. So I hope that we continue to focus on that sense of community and coming together to tackle what will be. I do not want to in any way minimize the massive challenges that we will face moving forward. They will be significant, but I believe that we've learned a lot that we can capitalize on in meeting them.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, your passion, one of the things I really respect about you is your passion for your community, your passion for your people that you serve alongside every day just radiates in all that you do. So let's talk about your people for a minute. You know, the drastic shift that they've had looking at this coming school year. This is not the case where we send a couple of emails on here's the directions for this year. I mean, professional learning has to be such a vital core to all of this. I mean, always, but especially now. So how are you thinking about professional learning now and moving forward, and what that's going to look like to really support your staff?
Yeah, so I mean, first of all, I don't presume to know what that is. We need to ask our folks what they need, right? So next week or two, the head of our Highline Education Association and I are going to have some conversations with our teachers and staff on what have you learned, right? I want to hear that. But more importantly, what have you learned that we need to do differently, that we need to do less of, that we need to do more of, and I think more importantly, that we need to do none of? What are some of the things we've learned over the last few months that will inspire us to come back in whatever way we come back, because we are coming back, to seize this moment to really look at education and look at how our children learn differently. And so I think engaging in those conversations, and I'm not talking about, you know, how many, you know, masks and thermometers we're going to need. We can figure, that's a mathematical equation that we can figure out. I'm really more interested in bringing folks together to think bigger and to figure out how we can come together as one united team in service of our children. And so I think there's tremendous opportunity there. But I do think that we will need to provide tremendous social emotional support for students and staff. I do believe our teachers will need support and tools in how to build relationships from a distance. It is likely that they will not be in person with their students every day of the week. So how are they going to build those relationships? And I'm talking with, for example, one of our local schools of education around, can they help provide some tools and training for our folks along those lines? And I think too, this notion that we're going to need our folks to, build more confidence in what distance learning looks like, because it is a part of our reality now. And I believe it's going to be a part of our reality moving forward. Now, I can envision, Tom, a time moving forward when we can come back at scale physically, that there will be students and teachers who would prefer to remain in a remote learning environment. And we've seen some staff and students thrive in this environment. And so I think that gives us an opportunity as public K-12 school systems to be our own online learning providers, right? How is it that we are going to have online school as part of the portfolio of learning opportunities that kids in Highline have? That's a longer term dream. But for now, I need to make sure that our teachers continue to learn and feel confident, teaching in this different environment.
Yeah, so well said. So let me ask you this. Another piece that I really, really respect, and I think it's come through here on the podcast, is how humanistic and human-centered you are, and just the relational side and seeing people first. And so how is it for school and district leaders? What advice can you give that we make sure, with all the chaos in our world and all the decisions and all the managerial type things that are just real that they've got to do to make sure that the system operates, how do we make sure we keep people and relationships at the heart of our decision making?
It's a great question. I think that the one thing, or one of the things that I've always tried to do in my best moments as a leader, and I don't always exhibit my best moments as a leader, I'm flawed more than the average bear. But when I'm in a challenging dynamic with someone and they're upset, I really try to step back and figure out, what is it that they need from me in this moment? What is motivating this behavior? What do they need to hear? What do they need to share? And I think more than ever before, I've tried to bring that into what we've been living over the past several weeks, months. What is it that I can do to acknowledge the reality that our children, our staff, our families, our community are dealing with? And, one of the things that I shared, and it's funny, I was on my Peloton, and one of the instructors, several weeks ago said, "We're not looking for perfection, we're looking for persistence." And I thought, beautiful, that's exactly it. And so, I shared that out. It's persistence, not perfection, is our goal right now. And just reminding people that I'm screwing up on a daily basis. They're screwing up on a day. We're all figuring it out together. And I think more than ever before, our folks need to see their leaders as human and as in the struggle with them, in whatever that looks like, and not trying to paint things as being prettier or easier or smoother than they are, because they're not. So I think that modeling what it means to struggle and saying that I have bad days too, I think that's important. I think amplifying one of our sayings in Highline, and I've always tried to live by this as a leader, is health and family first. In my experience, the work fairies never show up at night to get the work done for you. It will be there in the morning. It will be there on Monday. So, but your kid's baseball game or that appointment to get your blood pressure checked, those really need to happen now. And so really reinforcing that with people and saying health and family first, and encouraging my team to take time off, to work less if they need to. I just think that's been more important than ever before, because everyone is struggling in some way. I shared out a few weeks ago, we all have a story. And while our stories are all unique, the fact that we all have a story is what binds us together. So I think we just have to acknowledge that everyone more than ever before has a story right now. And let's not make assumptions over what's motivating someone's behavior, even if it's less than ideal, and try to have a little more grace and compassion to support them as best we can. Sorry, long answer. But it's
no, that's why such incredible insight and just such depth to the different facets that you were sharing there. So let me give you one final question. You are a superintendent. I know that you are very humble in nature, but people admire you from near and far, just in terms of the work that you do. Give folks across the country one piece of advice, whether you're a principal, whether you're a teacher that's kind of nervous looking forward, whether you're a superintendent colleague of yours, as we embark on this new school year, what's one piece of advice that you would give them?
Wow, it's a little corny, but I think it's really important. More than ever before, this is a marathon, not a sprint. And so, I've heard my superintendent colleagues say, I really need to take a day off, but I just can't. And, there's no cookie for the person who's last in the parking lot. There's no reward for working yourself to a point where you're of no use to your family, much less your staff. So I think that we all have to continue to take care of ourselves personally, but more importantly, Tom, to come together professionally. Find your network. Rely on your network. I have a group of female superintendents, and we've been doing Zooms most every Sunday just to check in. And we're actually not talking about a lot of current events. We try to find questions that get us to think about just our lives and our leadership and who we are. It's invigorating, right? So I think what I always tell people is the beauty of being a teacher, being a principal, being a superintendent is that if we're lucky, we have found work that feeds our soul. And so while the work that we do feeds our soul professionally, we also have to make sure that we're doing what feeds our soul and keeps us happy, sane, and healthy personally. And so balancing that personal and professional, because at the end of the day, we're of no good to our communities if we burn out. And more importantly, our modeling for folks, the importance of that gives them, I think, the push to do it for themselves. And in that way, we're making our whole staff and community healthier. It's not selfish at all. It's just the right thing to do. It's good leadership.
That's Susan Enfield, everybody. Susan, I'm in awe of your leadership. Thank you for what you do every single day, and keep leading the way.
Stay safe and healthy.